start time before it goes live, but we will find out.
I got a little thing saying you're live. A little
Nice.
prompt.
Yes. It's not live on my phone yet. Like I'm on the
Oh,
link, but it's not showing, so that's what I'm waiting on because if I can't see it, then probably most people can't see it.
right. I just got a little drop down saying that you are live, and I think we have
Yes.
one person viewing.
Oh,
Yes, that's
yes.
probably me.
Oh, okay.
So if you wrote something,
Yes.
yeah, write something in the chat. We'll see. So we're pre-testing. We're troubleshooting as we go.
All right, so I guess we'll give it a minute or two.
Sure.
I can see.
And then we can start
Oh,
because
I can see. Welcome at about 6 acres. I
look
see
at
it.
you. You're very, very good. So yeah, I figured if we give it a minute because it's 12:59. We'll give it a minute to start
Oh,
at
sure.
1.
Okay.
But we're just yeah, this is so exciting for us.
I'm excited too. Nick said
Mostly,
that you guys are getting big thunderstorms.
yeah.
Ah,
It actually rained all night, like just the worst storms possible.
oh
We've
my
been getting
gosh.
hit by a lot of storms.
We
Yeah, I
got
think it's the
snow.
wind.
Yeah, we got wind and snow here in
Hmm.
Wisconsin this last week. So the weather is not cooperating for garden prep.
No, no, not at all. Like we need to harden some tomatoes off, and we can't do it when it's this windy and this like wild
Oh,
and
yeah.
crazy.
They'll
So that's
snap
been
off.
kind of the thing that's been on hold for us. Like the days when it's 70 degrees, we can't do anything. And we try to
Oh,
wait until it's comfortable
sure.
for the little seedlings.
Yeah, otherwise
Um,
they'll snap off in that wind.
yeah,
Yeah.
We
yeah.
haven't even started seed starting yet. This next week, I think we're going to start onions and peppers. But it's
Okay.
still like we still have snow on the ground here.
I know when you were like, is this fall spring? I'm like, no, this is still winter. You
I'm like,
have
I hope
snow.
I'm looking out the window right now to the orchard where I can see, and I see like some blooms coming out on the peach trees. I'm like, please
Get
don't let there be
out.
another freeze.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll take a picture later. But I guess, we can start. And if you
okay.
are joining us on the live, thank you so much. We're so excited that you're here live. And if you're joining us on the recorded replay, we're so grateful that you're here as well. And I'm just so thankful that Rhonda from Little Bit of Everything Homestead. I'm gonna say it wrong, Rhonda. I'm sorry, but
That's
we're
okay. It's
we're
a
just so
mouthful.
happy that
Little, like
Lil
little.
Little Bit of Everything Homestead. We're so excited that you joined us to talk gardening because our worlds are completely different.
They are.
Like completely different. So it's exciting to hear a little bit about what you're going through. But before that, because we might have different subscribers and because our channels are slightly different, I want to hear about you and your channel. Tell us a little bit.
Well, I started my channel when we bought this property because it was a fixer upper and I wanted to log all of the things that we did. So we gutted, it was an old farmhouse, 200-year-old farmhouse, and we gutted it down to the studs, and then we hired a builder and we did an addition. And with that, when we bought the property, it had a barn and 4
Mhm.
ponds. And at the other homestead, we had already started kind of establishing, like we had chickens, ducks, and geese. So when we moved them over here, it was kind of a perfect fit. So when I decided to start the YouTube channel, I did not know what to name it because it's like we do bees, we do
Mhm.
preserving, we do gardening, we have animals, like all the kind of homesteading stuff that you would think we do. So I told Scott, I'm like, we have to have a name, like, and it has to be appropriate to the content that we put
Mhm.
out. So I'm like, because we do a little bit of everything. And he
Yeah.
goes, well, there's your name. And I'm
That's
like, oh my
awesome.
gosh, it fits.
Nice.
So that's how we came about with the name of Little Bit of Everything Homestead because we do a little bit of everything. Scott is pretty handy like Nick. You guys can build so much and it's so fun. So it's like we do building, we do fruit trees, and we have raspberries and blueberries, and we have animals, and we have chickens and ducks and geese and sourdough, and all of it.
A
So
little bit of
that's
everything.
yeah, and I've been doing it for, I don't know, maybe a year, pretty close to a year, I guess. But in the last, I think probably 6 months, I got really serious where I really like tried.
Mhm.
And you learn, it's a learning process. YouTube is not like Instagram at all. With Instagram, you can do a tiny little short and then just write a little script, and it's easy. With
Mhm.
YouTube, it's like a movie. You have to think of
Mhm.
angles and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a learning curve, but to like with you guys, how you document all your stuff. I that's what I wanted the YouTube channel for,
That's
essentially.
awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome. And, similar, because again, we don't know who's joining us and we're excited about that. Our channel has really been very similar to yours. We don't have a cool name like yours with the apostrophe, but it's really been documenting our journey because we you said we can build things. We literally knew nothing about
Yeah,
DIY.
we had no, I mean, we had
Yeah.
no homesteading skills whatsoever. We came from the suburbs. We, originally from New York, moved down to Texas. Couldn't grow anything out in the suburbs. Couldn't build anything out there either. Didn't have any animals. I mean, we had a dog, but
Mhm.
until we decided to homestead and document a journey, we were at that stage in our life. We're 40 years old, empty nesters, so we're like, let's do it. Let's,
Yeah, I
Yeah, it
bet
was
you.
the right time to do it.
yeah,
Yeah, a
get some.
huge culture shock from New York City to Texas.
It
Wow.
was
Do you
very,
miss
very
the
different.
snow?
Yeah, even though we were upstate like New York, we were just like 14 miles north of Manhattan. But even so, that the world is so different. But we've enjoyed every bit of it. So
Sure.
we've been having a lot of fun. But we thought that after the intro, we would talk a little bit about why you garden, because we feel like the why you garden is probably the most important part to establish, because that guides everything else that you would do in your spring garden prep or in any garden prep. So tell us a little bit about why do you garden, Rhonda?
I garden for, first of all, because it gets me out into nature.
Mm.
Like, it gets my hands in the dirt. So I get sun, I get fresh air, and it brings me joy. You hear the birds singing and the wind howling, and it's a very calming experience for me. For what I grow food for my family, um, basically what we eat. Like, so if I were to grow like lettuce, we would eat lettuce for that growing season, because lettuce isn't really a fun thing to preserve. I don't know that if you can preserve lettuce really. But we do like we grow a lot of tomatoes and a lot of peppers because I like to can. So in the winter months, you open a can of spaghetti sauce.
Mhm.
We garden. Scott really got me into gardening when he and I met, because he had a tiny little garden and I had a couple of little container gardens with tomato plants. So he
Mhm.
taught me about soil, about getting out into nature, and like all the bugs that come in. And I never really was like a worm girl. But now when I see a worm in my garden, I get so excited because I
So
That's
know
awesome.
that then my soil is thriving. So it's all like it fits all of those, like your sight, your sound, your feel,
Mhm.
and then the food you grow, you get to taste. So it hits all of those senses of, like I'm really doing something here. Plus, it's a little bit of a pat on the back because it's like I grew that.
Yeah.
Like, I had cabbages one
Yes.
year. We had a little bit of a cabbage moth damage, but my cabbage, initially, the cabbage head was like as big as my head. And I
Mhm.
thought that was so cool because I've never grown cabbage before, and now it's huge. And I'm like, look at this. Like I
That
grew it.
is huge though. Yes. That is
So it's,
awesome.
and it's exciting and it's fun and it's challenging at times. And sometimes things don't always go your way and you fail and you
Mhm.
learn. So it's more, to me, it's just more than growing food. It's
Mhm.
that all that stuff that comes along with it. And then plus, if I get to treat my family and friends to a couple of extra
Mhm.
zucchinis and a jar of tomato sauce, then, that's a benefit from it.
Yeah, exactly. And
I
that's
don't
very
know if I
similar to
answered, if I got to the point. I kind of rambled on there, but
No,
it's
you
fun.
did.
It's
That's good.
fun for me.
Yeah. No, you absolutely did because that's what's going to drive everything else that you do. And I think if we're talking about it, like you hit the most important one to us, which is we like to eat in season. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
so the stuff that we grow, we're not necessarily looking to grow things that store for a very, very long time, or we just want food that tastes good, that we can eat in season. Some of it that we can store, like tomato sauce.
Tomato. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the okra.
Yeah.
So anything that you can add like additional skills of, learning the
Mhm.
canning and learning that stuff, but not, we're not at the, the one end of the spectrum where we're prepping or anything like that. So, because it's just Juana and I, and,
Mhm.
occasionally our son will come over. So and my dad lives with us. So it's, cooking what we have available, that way we don't have to go out to eat,
Mhm.
and it just tastes so much better. And not to mention the health benefits. And,
Mhm.
you
Sure.
know, we've had, my doctor, I lost 50 pounds in
Yeah.
1 year
Yeah.
because
Wow.
we're basically
Mhm.
not going out to eat and we're just eating what we grow. And
Yeah.
the doctor was just like, "No, you're taking medicine or doing something." I'm like, "No, I'm just eating from the garden, eating our own what we raise." So it's the health aspects, the fun aspects. And I'm an insect guy too.
Mhm.
I will stop and play with the bugs. I used to be
Yeah.
definitely afraid of spiders and bees, but getting in the garden and stuff is just like,
It brings them
it's just awesome.
all. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
so cool. The
Yeah.
life that
So
it brings, more than just the plants.
exactly. So if you're joining us on this, we would love for you to drop in the chat why you want to garden. If you're a seasoned gardener, let us know why you garden. And if you are just looking to start garden, let us know why you want to start gardening, right? Is it for storage purposes, for just the satisfaction of it? Is it for flowers? Because that's perfectly acceptable too. Some people garden for the pure joy of seeing flowers, and that's beautiful too. Um, so let it drop a note in the comments and let us know because I think that is cool. And then let's get into a little bit more of the meat of actual prep, right? Like not only do you actually have to physically prep, but you also need to know a few things. So tell us about your garden, what you're planning for your garden, Rhonda. Like let us know about your zone, what kind of structure do you have, your soil, fun
Well,
things like that.
I'm in Wisconsin, so I am zone 5A, 5B. There's kind of a little
Mhm.
gray area there. And because we just moved here, I don't really have like a designated garden area yet. So we watched this last summer and spring, we watched the pattern of the weather. So
That's
we
awesome.
watched where the sun hit in the yard. We watched
Mhm.
for low points after it rained, where like the rainwater would puddle, to pick an area where we want to have a larger garden so we can experiment and grow things
Mhm.
that we haven't really grown before. And we want to have vining things and flowers and some pretty things.
Mhm.
So we haven't started that yet. So our first step was to pick the spot,
Yep.
because you know, you can't garden underneath the tree. So
Mhm.
we looked for that. I think that our soil here, um, because the previous owners were not um, neat people. They didn't have areas for certain debris. So in the area that we picked was a spot where he discarded like his horse manure, his hay, his trash. So, after 20 years, they lived here for 20 years. So after 20 years, that kind of all broke down,
That's
and it
awesome.
It's good stuff.
unknowingly he
Mhm,
kind of fed the land for us. So
mhm,
where we picked, we did a couple of tills with the garden tractor, and we think that the soil is pretty good. You know, it had good color, it had a good smell. It wasn't super clumpy or full of clay. So that is something to look for. We never did it testing. We never did a soil
mhm.
test because this will be our first year. So we're gonna just, I think, throw some stuff in the ground and keep our fingers crossed and hope it grows.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm glad you brought that up because if you are prepping for a garden and you're either going into a new location or even if you've been gardening in that area for a long time, it is a good idea to get a soil test and just see what nutrients are deficient
sure.
in there. Now, it sounds like you hit the jackpot.
Yeah, horse
Well,
manure is good because compost down. You probably got a lot of good biology in that
yeah,
soil right
it,
there.
Mhm,
So,
yeah, unknowingly, I think he just, disposed of it away from the barn that, I don't know what he was thinking or doing. I can't speak for him. But, thank you for doing that because it
exactly.
it fed the soil for us.
Yes.
And we live in an area where there's a lot of animal traffic. We have squirrels and rabbits and deer. So I think one of the most important things for our prep to be successful is that we are going to have some kind of fencing or
Mhm,
barrier
yeah.
to keep those animals out, or they will decimate. I mean, we started our fruit orchard last fall, and
mhm.
the tiny little growths, we put chicken wire and stuff around it, but
Yeah.
the tiny little growths that poke through that chicken wire,
I mean,
the deer came in and they nibbled, 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 and you can tell that they took some of it off. So we are really going to have to put a lot into the fencing. And that stuff isn't cheap. Chicken wire
Yep.
doesn't
yep.
keep a deer out, and they can jump.
Exactly.
So it's going to have to be
Exactly.
sturdy and tall.
Yeah, we have Malachi Plays. Thank you so much for joining us. But saying yes, you are so right. And it is, I mean, you're 100% correct on all of those little elements that you
Yeah.
have to think about and plan for because they are challenges. Now, in our garden, I mean, you can tell us a little bit about our
Yeah. So
garden, which is
our
different.
our area is so we're in East Texas, and what they always say about Texas soil is you step like 6 feet in one direction, you have different soil type. So it's right now we have like a sandy clay soil. So like the top layer is it's almost they call it in some areas sugar sand. So it's a really fine sand, and when it rains, it just washes out, and you can see it collect somewhere else. Um, but we have so we don't do anything in ground. We do a lot of the raised beds because the soil
Yeah.
keeps washing it out, doesn't hold any nutrients. But we
Plus, the
behind
little
our
roots probably don't have anything to hold on
Mhm.
to.
yeah,
Exactly.
it gets washed out. There's a lot of erosion, and some of the things we had to deal with is clearing out a lot of the movement of that sand to different areas. So, you know, our garden is right behind our house because that was the best. It was closest to our water source. It, it is a place we can watch, and it's not too far away,
Hmm.
up on the hill. And um, we do have we had that traditional like 8 foot tall wooden fence that surrounded it, but we wanted to take it out so we can see back into the orchard.
Hmm.
And so we put up what's called the cattle paddle fencing, and it's like a
Yep.
4 by 4 square fence. And luckily, the previous owners had a lot of it. It was actually buried in the ground, so we actually pulled it up and did our fencing out of that, and we thought we were
Nice.
good.
Hmm.
But then when we planted the first year, we noticed things still getting eaten, and it was all the rabbits were getting through those holes. So then we had to put in another preventative fence on the bottom,
Oh,
and so
that's a good
far
point.
that deals with it. But we're I think we're at that point we're looking for something more functional.
Sure.
Not
So you do all of your gardening in raised beds?
Yeah, so like 90% of our gardening, sorry, will be raised beds. Last year we've had about 50-50. because we have 3 garden locations and we have the orchard. So we have the main garden, which is all raised beds, and that's the one right behind our house. We have an area near a chicken coop, which is mostly perennials, but then it was also our watermelon patch. So we had um, berries, we've done sunflowers there as a trap crop, because it'll pull it away from the main garden.
Yep.
And so that helped out a lot the first year with stink bugs. They just all gravitated and ate all of our sunflowers, but the rest of our crops did well. And then we have an area behind our container, which is really good soil. Same thing, like you said. And hello, Annie Robinson. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, but that area has very, very good soil. We did great the first year with sweet potatoes. I think because of the sun and how it hits, like you were talking about your area, you studied it for a while before you selected it. And once you did, it was because you knew how the sun pattern worked and how the water worked. And so we did great the first year. The second year, every single vole in the state of Texas decided to join our
Oh
party.
no.
I think they found, yeah, so they ate, we had an awesome like sweet potato vegetation,
Yes.
like the leaves and everything were good, but no potatoes underground. So
They ate them all.
they ate them all.
Oh
And
no.
Yeah.
so that's where we're thinking we may, and when we're talking about planning and doing things like that, prepping, we've cleared everything out of there
Mhm.
and been just throwing like the goat manure and chicken manure from cleanup over there to add more organic material. And
Sure.
we may play with doing tomatoes and things in ground because not anything that's growing underneath. So
Underneath,
the
right?
bulb and stuff. Yeah, so we don't have to put any hardware cloth or anything directly in the ground. May do some raised beds over there. So it's all an experiment.
Yeah, we are thinking about raised beds there too, but it's those challenges that you don't really find until after you've already started, right? Like you don't know what pests are going to come until you've
Right.
already made your selection. Now, deer and things like that you can kind of plan for, and you've tried to, right, with your trees. But there's other things that really don't come until you build it.
Right.
And
All the
so
little bugs we were talking about.
yes, exactly. Like, specific bugs too, like potato beetles and the giant Japanese beetles, they don't come until they have a food source. And so
Right.
once you
Right.
do have that, you kind of have to think ahead and plan for it. But as we're talking about all this, I'm dying to know, like, what is your garden style? As you're thinking through your garden and prepping, and if you're joining us on your chat in the chat, I would love for you to also share your garden style. And, we're looking for things like, are you organic, till versus no till? Are you a square foot gardener? Chaos gardener, those are my favorite.
Yeah.
Companion planting or permaculture, experimental or tried and true. Like what kind of gardening style would you say that guides your planning and your prepping?
Um, I have a little bit of all of that, I think. We I am so new to gardening, so Scott does a majority of it. And he will do when we can find organic seeds, we will purchase those, but we're not opposed to buying a certain kind of watermelon or a certain kind of pumpkin if that's the kind that we want. If it isn't organic, I'm not going to not buy it.
Mhm.
We do mostly in-ground gardening. So the things that I grow because I know my family's going to eat it. Um, we did last year, not last year, the year before, because we were still at the other homestead. I had never tasted okra or knew what
Mhm.
okra was. And I had joined a seed swap little group on Instagram. And in the package that I got from one of the ladies, she put in okra seeds. And I'm like, well, I'm going to throw them in the garden and see if they'll grow. Well,
Mhm.
holy moly. First of all, an okra flower is
Gorgeous.
gorgeous. They're
Mhm.
beautiful. And an okra plant, I thought it was going to be like a bush where it vines out. It grows up. and the
Mhm.
leaves are huge. And you get a lot of okra on one
Mhm.
plant, and they come in all different sizes. Like I had little baby ones, and then I had some that were like that long.
Mm.
So for my first time gardening and growing okra, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. So we do a little bit of experimental. We
Mhm.
do, I would like to put in some raised beds in the garden for, like, I would like to do like just a specific area for like all the herbs. So all
Mhm.
the herbs can be in one spot. Or I'd like to add a little bit of pretty too. So I would like a couple of containers to have like flowers, like perennial flowers,
Mhm.
like coneflowers or borage or like the edible flowers. I would like to add that.
Yeah.
Um, I've never, we, in the beginning, we till the land because I don't know what's underneath it. I don't know what
Mhm.
kind of soil we have because this will be our like our first full year here. So
Mhm.
we're going to till. Um, After that, I don't I don't know that it'll be necessary to till because we will keep the garden beds turned. So I'm organic when I can, but I'm not opposed to other. Maybe adding a little bit of pretty. I garden, I grow what we eat. I like to experiment and
Yeah.
try and grow new things. Yeah, chaos. Chaotic gardener would probably be my label.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah, and
what do
it's
you
you know
think are
we
driving?
I think we do. I mean, we do a little planning because with the beds, the raised beds, you have a certain amount that you put in, but I've always lived by cram it all in there because especially some plants here in Texas, where we have it first, our gardens, it's exposed to sun all the time. But Texas sun is different. If you've never been to Texas, Texas sun is different. It will scorch everything once it gets to summer. So by planting multiple things that have different heights, they'll sort of
Oh,
act like
sure.
natural shade for things. And so we try to plan it out that way. Like if we plant tomatoes and we'll put marigolds in as pest control. So we have some sort of plan and we keep track of where we plant it, but we're big experimenters and saying, okay, what's going to work here, or try new plants, different varieties, especially, or put
Do
them
you
in
guys
different
keep a
locations.
garden journal? Like, do you journal the stuff that you grow?
So we do try to, and that's something that we have as part of our tips is that it's so important to document in some way or form. There's apps. I do have like an actual journal,
Sure.
but there's also like we did a Google Sheet 1 year. And so that helps out a lot because number one, if you draw a little map of where you have, it's so important
Yep.
to know what you've grown the year before. And for a new gardener, right? Like, sorry, for a new garden, like what you're having, it's not as important. But for us, when we've had our garden and this is going to be our third year, we don't want to plant nightshades where nightshades have been. We want to be able to
Yep.
rotate those. And, consequently, we have one of our prime beds is now holding onions because it's had tomatoes in there. And as we're planning through, we're like, that's what's going to go in there. But it's so important to do that, right? To you don't
Some notes,
necessarily
journal,
have
yeah.
to know like this exact hole is going to have a tomato, but you do have to have in your head like I've grown squash here, and if I grow squash here again, there's a chance that the squash vine borer, which is something we're very susceptible to, that it's already in the ground there, and that the best way that I can assure that I'll have a harvest for that is to change the location for it. So things like that are so important, and that's why, yeah,
Yeah, because
documenting is
yeah,
huge.
and it's crop rotation or growing rotation
Mhm.
and keeping those things you can tell, especially with insect pests,
Mhm.
be like, hey, today I was out in the garden, and we encourage everyone, you have the garden, you got to be in there like every day.
Every day, yeah.
So even if it's hot, if it's take a break during when it's raining and dodge the raindrops, but no, because you can have one day you can have I don't know if you guys have the tomato hornworm, you know, it's like they come overnight and they
Yeah.
will decimate your
Yeah.
tomatoes. And if you don't, if you miss a day and you don't catch it, you can write that date down. Hey, it's come this day.
Yep.
Then you can be more preventative, and with crop rotation too, whatever's in the soil, if there's any disease, then you can rotate that out, plant something else that's not affected by that. So it's yeah, even little
Mhm.
notes like we rely on our phone because we're taking pictures, and that's another thing. Taking pictures while you're out there is a
That's
good
a
way to
great
document
idea.
and prep. So it's and we've listed some cool apps too that you can use because insects,
Mhm.
you know, mushrooms that grow naturally in your garden, are good. And you want to look at disease, there's certain apps that you can easily use while you're out in the garden, take a picture.
To just
Yep.
identify them, right? Like we've gotten so used to saying like, "Hey, does anybody know what this is?" But a lot of times Nick uses his app, and that's how he finds out like, "Oh, this is a beneficial bug." Or like me when I didn't know what the lacewing bugs are, and they're great. They're beneficial insect. I didn't know what they were, and they look funny. So,
Yeah,
so
when
all
you
those
don't
things
know,
just
you're like, what is
yeah,
Uh,
this?
yeah.
you're like kill them all.
Yeah. And if you
Right?
see it,
Because
if
I
you see
mean
a
there
plant,
are, and that's such a good topic to bring up because there are insects that will decimate your crop, but
Mhm.
there are also insects that are supposed to be there that will help your garden grow.
Yes, yes,
So, and
and not
when
only
I
that, but
first
it's yeah. Go
when I
ahead.
first
Sorry.
started gardening, I did not know that. So I thought every bug was a bad bug. And then Scott comes in and he's like, "Well, no, this is this." And like the
Yeah,
hornworms, I
pepper.
thought it was a caterpillar. Like I didn't know that they had a special name, and it was huge and it was squishy and it looked horrible. And I'm like, "What is that?" And he fed
Yeah.
it to the chickens. He's like, "Yeah, that's a bad bug."
yeah,
But
Mhm.
the
we
moths are
didn't have a
beautiful.
bunch of them. We get the those cabbage moths.
Mhm.
We get those a lot. But
Yeah, and they're
w-
brutal.
yeah, they will take out a cabbage in a
Mhm.
day. Like
Yeah.
they lay their eggs, their larvae, I should say, will
Mhm.
decimate a cabbage in a
Uh,
day. They're not
Yeah.
they're not nice butterflies.
The moths. But that's also important to note is like as you go through the season of your garden, if you spot some aphids, like you don't necessarily have to go to DEFCON 7.
yeah. So the thing
Right.
with certain pests, like if there's a pest there, that should be a notification to you or saying, hey, something's not
Mhm.
right with the plant, because they will only come to the plant because that plant is sick. So there's a reason why that plant is sick then. And so you got to now look at the soil. What is that plant not getting from that soil? So when you're prepping and doing things like that, making sure your soil is healthy first,
Mhm.
that can cut your pest control problems big time.
Mhm.
Hello, Shelley Boardman.
Okay. Hi, Shelley. Thank you for joining us. So, all right. So we've talked a little bit about soil testing already, which is a huge part of prepping your garden, like we were talking about. And if you are buying bags of soil, you may not necessarily, and have a raised bed garden, you may not necessarily need to test it that first year. But as we were talking earlier, like after you have a growing season and you have something in there, it could have depleted some of the nutrients. So you might want to get your soil tested. But one of the things we were talking about is like soil testing is good to do because it saves you money, right? Like you're not just adding blanket nutrients to your soil. You can really hone in on what your soil needs. And the other thing is, just in case you didn't know, that's something that you can have done through your local ag extension. So you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a kit through um, I don't know, Amazon or like whatever place. You can actually just go through your actual ag extension. And I think every state has some. And I can, when I post this, I can put the URL of where you can find where it is for your state because that helps. Like in Texas, we have the Texas A&M Ag Extension, AgriLife. Is it
Yeah.
AgriLife?
And then
Yeah.
you're certain most well down here a lot of the counties have like a local extension so you can go to and get the materials for it, but they're also a good resource for other things too. So like the insects or pest problems, or even water tests, or
Yeah.
other things that you want to do on your land. They're a good resource to get that information from too.
hmm
That's
And that is
awesome.
something else you can have tested is your water too. If you're unsure about the quality of your water, if you have well water and don't necessarily have the information about it, you can also get your water tested. Um,
Okay, I have a question. We're talking about water. Hello, Brian
Mhm.
Swanson. So we have ponds on this property. So I, logically thinking, thought if we put the garden, the location we're going to put our garden is in front of one of the ponds we currently have.
Mhm.
So logically, I'm thinking that we would just use the pond water to water the garden when it's the dry season without the rain. And I think I posted this question on Instagram, and it grossed out a lot of people.
Oh, wow.
So my logic behind it was, you have fish in there, you have ducks in there, you have the gray heron birds. Like, I'm thinking that you're going to get a lot of kind of natural mother nature kind of nutrients that I'm going to take from point A and
Mhm.
put back into point B. Is
Not
that
only
not
that, but when you have rain, right? Like that
Yeah,
would have the nitrogen too.
yeah, and it should be, as long as there's no like chemical spillage or
hmm
runoff from
Yeah,
other
no, we nope.
places around.
Yeah, we're not by a farm field or like any like spray or like,
hmm
and we don't use spray like that on, like, we don't do
Yeah.
pest control or mosquito control or anything like some people do. They spray their yards. We don't do that
Mhm.
because we have chickens.
Yeah.
So I thought it was like, why wouldn't we just, use the pond water? It's
Makes
right
sense to
there.
me.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds, especially if you're in a time of drought, that you can use that. I
Mhm.
mean, we've been
Yeah,
told to use,
that's what I
we had the
thought.
the geese. They said use, in the little swimming pool, to
Yeah.
use that to,
I
fertilize your garden as well. So,
I use those on my the geese water. I use those
Mhm.
in my container gardenings for my
Yeah.
flowers. And I'll tell you what, my flowers were healthy. They grew. They
Mhm.
were huge. Like, they doubled in size. Like, there's something to say about using what
Yeah.
nature
yeah, that's
gives
there.
you to put it back.
Yeah.
So I thought using the pond water was a really good idea, but some people were like, ew. And like, you don't know what bugs are in there. You don't know what's in that water. And I'm like, well, if a fish can live in the water,
Yeah,
and
that's good.
it's not going to kill me, right?
I mean, I cannot think of a logical reason why not,
Well,
right?
you wouldn't want to drink the water. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yes.
No,
Don't
we're
drink
not
it.
going to drink it.
Yes. So to me, it makes perfect sense, and it's
I
making
thought
use
so too.
of your resources, right? Now,
Right.
if you wanted to have it tested, like I said, you
yeah,
probably could, but to me,
Sure.
it makes good sense
because
to use your
there
resources.
is also on the other end the research of, if you're just using tap water or hose water, think about what's in, depending on where you live, what chemicals are adding to that water to kill it.
hmm
Now you're adding it to the
Right.
soil, and we're going back to soil biology. A lot of the chlorine or the
hmm
chloramine, that's going to kill
Yeah.
fungus. It's going to kill the macroinvertebrates and all the healthy stuff in there. So why not? Why not the pond water?
And
Yeah.
I thought too, I'm going to try it. I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to experiment in my garden prep. And I'm
People
going
use
to see.
rainwater. I mean, that's
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I was talking is as you're planting your garden, you want to be cognizant of water source. Like you said, you have a pond there. We put our main garden and our overflow garden very close to where we had hose bibs
Mhm.
already available. But we also one of the first things we added was a rain barrel or a water catchment area
Yeah.
because rainwater is really good for your plants and
yeah.
if you don't catch it, if you don't have it somewhere holding, you just lose it. And so to us, it just made perfect sense. And you have the
Yeah.
extra nitrogen that is in rainwater that you wouldn't necessarily have in, hose
Right.
water. Like
Right.
if,
And
because we
in
don't have a well.
Texas, Do you guys go through, like, you have a drought season where you
Mhm.
have
Oh
like
yeah.
really long periods of time when you
Yeah.
don't get rain?
Yeah, and
Mhm.
then you're put into like water restrictions on when
Yeah.
you can only
Yep.
water on certain days, and again, so that rainwater catchment comes in,
Very
it's
handy.
very handy, super
Yeah.
handy.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
a
that
great idea.
expensive to set up either once you have it set up. Now, you need to have some kind of roof or something for it to come off of.
Sure.
So we
Yep.
have one very close to our actual house. Well, it's attached to the house gutter, but we've also thought about putting one out in like our orchard, just putting one of those
Yeah, making it
like
like a
lean-to
lean-to.
shed type structure, and then having a gutter that we could collect it from there. Because again, it's not fun. We don't have irrigation out to the orchard, and it's not fun to,
Right.
prop the hose all the way
All
up
water.
there. Yeah,
Mhm.
and they need the water, but that's definitely a good thing to talk about. And the other note that I have with prepping your garden and before you really start is you want to clean your tools every time. So now
Yeah.
as you're waiting and as you're starting your if you're doing your garden from seeds is a good time to clean all of your tools if you've had them before. Obviously if you buy them from the store, it's not as much, it's not as
Right.
important, but for sure cleaning existing tools is good to do now. And also uh if you use those tools and you know that a plant is diseased, you want to make sure that you clean them. And cleaning them, I think, is not that difficult. I hate saying that because I say it all the time that it really
Yeah,
is difficult.
I just
But
use like rubbing alcohol and just get that on there. I know some people like will dilute a bleach solution or like vinegar solution, but
Yep. Vinegar. I've heard
whatever.
vinegar. Yep.
yeah, and some people do like oil. What is that oil called?
Yeah, to make sure, like you can use a mineral oil in
Yeah.
sand and sort
Yep.
of, things are rusty or anything, you can use that to clean them.
But it's just a good time to do that right while you're prepping. Um and so we're kind of almost at time, but I did, before we go through like some of the general tips, I did want to ask, what are your plant selections like? Have you thought about that yet, Rhonda?
I'm pretty basic when it comes to selecting what we grow. We do like peppers, onions, cucumbers, tomatoes. So that straight across the board, that I think like everybody's go to, are the main like
Mhm.
tomatoes, onions, peppers. We do cabbage. I tried growing broccoli when we lived over at the other homestead 2 years ago. That did not do well, but my cauliflower did really well. We do beets. I love beets. Radishes, zucchini, okra is a new one that we're adding to the list. We do that. Oh, what are those things? Rutabagas.
Yeah,
They're like
rutabaga.
round, and they get the. I can't think of
Yeah.
the name right now. We do that. Um, Beans, peas. Kind of the nothing too flashy, but
Yeah.
those are all things
Mhm.
that we love to eat fresh, and a lot of it I can preserve to take into the winter months. So
Yeah.
we plant what we eat, and then we kind of experiment a little bit with new things.
Hmm.
We don't like one thing I thought like I would love to grow is eggplant, but I don't like eggplant. Scott isn't a fan of
We,
eggplant.
we won't get
But
started on our love-hate relationship with eggplant.
Yes.
I love
yeah,
eggplant,
so
I love it,
I don't
but
a
it's
lot of people grow eggplant and I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh my god, they're so pretty." But I would grow them just because they're pretty. I wouldn't eat them.
Hmm.
So
So you'd
we
have to
don't
find someone to gift it to then.
yeah, give them to because we don't eat eggplant. So
Yeah.
we grow what we eat, what we know we like. So there's a few like really flashy melons that I got in
Hmm.
my seed catalog that I thought, I would like to try and grow them, first of all
Yeah.
for fall decoration, but then to cut them open and see how they would fare like freezing or canning, like what
Mhm.
the meat of the pumpkin is. We in the winter months, I do a lot of baking and I add
Yeah.
pumpkin to a lot of different things. So that would be, something that we would like
Mhm.
go out on a ledge, but we're not really flashy. We're kind of straight across the board
Yeah,
gardeners,
like you
I
talked
think.
about, you like to stick with your tried and true and experiment as
Yeah, yep,
possible. But that's a great tip, and that does lead me into the tips, is that you want to grow what you will actually eat, because if you just grow all kinds of random things, you're going to be using up resources in your garden that could go towards something else.
right.
And so our issue was Swiss chard.
Yeah, so we had someone gift us some Swiss chard, and I was, let's
It looks cool. Everyone
Yeah,
grows it.
it's one of
Yeah,
those what they call cut again,
Yeah, cut and come again.
cut and come again. So you can, just like lettuce leaves and cut off, but we planted a couple of them from seed, and one didn't live, and then one did, and we may ate like 8 at one time, but
Was
it's
not
still in our bed outside right now. It has not died. It survived the frost.
good.
So
We've kind of left it to see
yeah.
like how much will do you have to live, and it's like I have all the will in the world.
So it's not something that we'll plan again, but sometimes the geese will eat it, and
Mhm.
that's
yeah,
one reason why we grow kale, because the geese will eat it. We're occasionally eat it.
Yeah, we
But
have a
it's
lot of kale for them because they love it, right? Like we have the same type of geese, and they just love kale a lot.
yep,
Um, but yeah, so grow what we eat. And then the other tip that I would give as you're preparing is to make sure that you have tools that you're going to need. One of them is insect netting. I feel like that was something that we felt was extra in our first year gardening. And then last year we ordered it, used it with our carrots, and used it because carrots don't need pollinating. And so you don't realize, like, wow, this made my life so simple. Like stuff wasn't eating my carrots because all I
yep,
did was put this insect netting over it. And so things like that, if you can group all your things like, hey, this does not need pollinating, I don't need to have it out in the open, that makes life so much simpler. And there's a lot of little things like that that you can do in your garden to make your life simpler. Um, the other thing is frost cloth and shade cloth, having those handy.
because that yeah, if you want to extend your season, because I don't know how long your grow season is,
we
up north.
our first frost date falls in April-ish, mid to April, and then we can go to, I think, the middle to end of October.
Mhm.
Like on a really good year, we can go to the end of October. But normally we're getting the pumpkins are getting frost on them in the
Mhm.
morning
Mhm.
on the leaves, middle of October, definitely before Halloween.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
that there's a short window, 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. So if you want to extend, again, that's another thing too. If you're looking at a goal or plan, if you want to extend your grow season, to have those things to protect it against the temperature, if you could put in one of those low hoop houses
Mhm.
over,
Yep.
even if you're in ground or on a bed, put that over, and to keep things growing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that's something that you can plan for now, right? Like before you put anything in the ground, if you put, I don't know, like rebar, I've seen people put it down
Yep.
by their raised beds, and then you get the PVC pipe that you can bend. And so those things, if you plan ahead, then you won't be disturbing roots or anything like that. You can just, you know, take off that PVC pipe when you don't need it and put it back
Yep.
on when you do, and attach your cloth. So um those things I think are, we feel like they're not necessity and not needed, but they do so much that I'm like, it is needed. Like I
Yeah, and it's reusable too. I mean,
yes,
Right.
exactly.
you
Well,
want
you
to
don't
invest
know
in
what
things that
you
you can
need
reuse.
until you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but those things I think are super, super helpful. The other
can I talk about one thing?
Yes.
So I know we're talking about and we're going a little over. I think that's okay. Are you okay, Rhonda, to keep going?
Okay,
Let's go.
good.
So I think, there's, some people that will grow their garden straight from seeds, or there are some that will go to the store and buy the starts and the plants, and there's no judgment, whatever you do. But we would highly recommend that you start saving seeds and growing from seed, because, especially if you buy certain starts, depending where you buy them from, a lot of the times they're hybrids. So if you then are trying to save seeds from a hybrid, you're not going to get
Yep. The
what
same
you're growing from
plant.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you can get good seeds, and it's usually buying a packet of seeds are cheaper than buying, some starts later on. So as you get going, and then you can save some seeds, and then that's in a hobby of itself,
Yeah.
is saving seeds and
Yeah,
being
that's
able
a
to
whole
swap with
nother
people.
another
Mhm.
Yeah,
YouTube.
Yes. But
definitely.
the other part to what he's saying is like some starts are not worth it when you think about it. Like cauliflower, if you can grow it from seed, you probably come out much. Maybe cauliflower is the wrong one because we don't grow cauliflower, but let's say cabbage. You can buy a head of cabbage at the store for $5, right? You can buy a head of cabbage as a start for $5. So it's like you're not really saving one way or the
Right.
other. So if you can grow it from seed, then you actually do save some money. So certain plants you kind of have to think ahead, like, am I just doing this for the thrill of growing it? In which case I don't care how much I spend on it because I'm going to grow it and it's going to be mine. Or am I doing it to save money? In which case you're not really saving unless you're growing it from seed. So certain ones, like to what you were saying, you kind of have to
Yeah,
think a little
it's
bit
understandable.
ahead.
Some people don't have, like, we don't have a greenhouse. We have limited
Yeah.
space on. We have a 6x4 grow tent that we put all our seedlings in. So that's a small amount of space for what we grow. I know some people just use the windowsill, and that's perfectly fine. But if
Mhm.
you don't have space to do seedlings and buying starts, we would recommend going to like a local nursery in your area
Yeah.
that's like proficient in and knowledgeable in what grows well, and
Yeah,
then,
for sure.
Yeah.
Use the
looking for
resources.
communities on Facebook.
Yep.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next one, which is when you're doing your garden prepping, you can't put a value on finding local gardeners and local nurseries, the local ag life place that we were talking about, like your ag extension. Those resources are invaluable, and all it takes is just you reaching out, right? You having a conversation with them because you learn things like stuff that we failed on was thinking that the seed packet was the bible for growing
Right.
whatever it was that the seed was in, and failing like 3 times before we finally were like, what are we doing wrong? We are following everything, and come to find that, oh, you're in a pocket in northeast Texas where that's not when you start carrots because you're not going to have any success even though you follow the seed packet. Like 8B in South Carolina is very different than 8B here. You
Yes.
have the same, last frost date and first frost date, but you don't have the same heat and temperature swing. So that's something that if you can find local places, definitely do. You'll be in a better place than you realize. And then you mentioned it, Rhonda, your seed swap. Like your eyes were open to okra that you would have never even thought about.
Yeah. And that we on Instagram, a lady, her we'll put it, can you put it in the descriptions or whatever, but
Yeah, I'm gonna try.
on
Yes.
Instagram, she's called Brambleberry
Hmm.
Farm, I think. And every Wednesday, she does a seed swap where people go on to her
Hmm.
Instagram and they will say, I'm looking for calendula. And then they would be like, oh, I'm looking for daisies or I'm looking for radishes. And then people come on and say, well, I have radishes that I can
Yeah.
share with you. And then you just kind of exchange all of these different seeds that you're like, I didn't even like. One year I got seeds for radishes, and the radish, it reminded me of that Christmas that
Like,
That's so cool. Mhm.
oh,
Mhm.
the collection of radishes
yeah.
because of that seed swap. I would not have known about that had it not been for Instagram. So, you know, Juana, I didn't know about the egg until you and I talked before the live, that that
Mhm.
was one of your resources. I didn't know that. So
Mhm.
now I will look into my local egg, wherever that is, and I will see how, you know, what resources are there that
Yeah.
they can give to me that I would use. So it really, like, even in like a farmer's market, when I would go to the farmer's market
Mhm.
and I would buy like a melon that I don't grow in my garden, I would talk to the person that grew it and say, you know, what is the
Mhm.
name of this melon? Where do you grow it? Like, what does it like? Did you grow it in a greenhouse?
Yeah.
And people are willing so
Yep.
much to share
Oh,
if you start the conversation.
Yep. Yeah,
So yeah, I
100%.
don't know if I answered the question, but
No, you did. But I think that's one of the things is like seed swaps is a great way to branch out of things. And maybe, like you said, radishes, you enjoy it, but it opened up your eyes to different kinds of radishes. And then there's a lot of other things besides just the farmers market. Like they're probably willing to share, but there's libraries too. There's some libraries that will have a seed swap like
oh, yep.
little place. So there's other places locally that you could probably find. And we do have a question. So what's popular that you grow in Texas versus somewhere else, veggie or fruit wise? So the key with our area is that we have heat that comes on pretty strong. And it usually comes in like May and lasts all the way through
yeah.
October. And so when it comes to something like tomatoes, we can grow them, but we have to start them super early and get them on the ground as soon as the last frost hits or just right before, and just be prepared to cover them because we won't tomato like
Yeah,
pollen
well,
isn't viable at a certain
yeah,
degree, like
the plant will like shut down
mhm,
if it's, I think we go by
85, I
like
want to say.
85 or
Yeah.
90 degrees, it'll stop producing flowers and just be on survival mode. So we get most of our harvest before then. So
Mhm.
as far as
Yeah.
what is
So like
popular that we grow,
so
hot
going with
peppers.
that, yeah, so going with that, like whatever we're gonna grow tomato wise, we basically have to harvest it before May, let's say, before the temperature, was beyond 85. But then we get a second harvest after that, like before our first frost date in like October through November. So we just have to be prepared and plan ahead to have those starts ready to go and on the ground for that
Oh, sure.
time. And so it's kind of this weird
You
time
have like
thing
you
that
have
we have
little
to deal
windows
with.
of opportunity that you
Yeah.
Yes.
have to know what grows when. And that's,
Yes.
I mean, that in Wisconsin, I just throw it in because our heat really isn't, you know, if we hit 100-degree day, that's a hot day for us.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And we're
we
jealous
just,
because we see you like, hey, look at all these tomatoes that I got on July 4th. And I'm like, we haven't seen a tomato in a month.
We're
yeah,
wasting water on tomatoes that are gonna fry.
yeah.
We have on the vine fried green tomatoes. That's what we have in Texas in
Oh,
the summer.
So beyond that, I mean, like things like apples, we tried to grow
Yeah,
here.
it's not. We
It
don't
just
have
is
enough
too hot and
chill.
humid.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have enough of the chill hours,
Yeah.
and where we are, we get a lot of humidity in the spring. So then there's a lot of fungal activity, and we have cedar trees and juniper trees that, when they spread their
Mhm.
pollen, they basically damage the apple tree. So we don't have that. I'm trying to think of
yeah.
other
Like,
things
could
that
you
are.
guys grow a fig tree or an orange tree?
We can do fig, like we have figs, but the grasshoppers have eaten all of it. So that's why we're happy we have chickens now.
But
So they
grow
can eat all the
down here. Figs
grasshoppers.
grow well.
The orange, you just have to bring them in like during the winter, which I think everywhere has to do that, right? But we don't have any oranges or citrus yet. That's something that we want to add. So maybe this year.
How about the roselle?
Yeah.
I don't know if that. I know.
Oh, the other thing is, Brian, one of the things that grows very well here is roselle hibiscus, which is similar to okra. The thing is, it's day length sensitive, and so it starts producing when the days get shorter. So probably around September is when you can start harvesting, and it is basically you're eating like the cover of the seed pod. You basically peel that off and you can make jellies with it, syrup. You can dry it for teas. So that's something that is really cool that we can grow here, but we're kind of teetering on that weird, like we can grow stuff that is tropical, but we can't, that's the weird part of it. But yeah, I guess, is there anything else, Rhonda? Because I know we kept everybody later than we meant to, but
I don't think so. I think we covered pretty much all our topics that we discussed before we went live.
yeah. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We are elated. Like, we learned so much from you, Rhonda. And I know you say you're new to gardening, but you're a great resource. So I thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for
Yes,
joining
thank you,
our
everybody.
live.
Thanks for joining.
We had so much
Bye.
fun.
Don't
Yeah.
forget, we always say this on our Instagram. You're awesome and you're loved.
Yes.
You are loved.
Until next time.
Take care, everybody.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
I'm not really sure how to do this.